Good morning and welcome to the Beer Farmers Beer Con 1 I'm going to say, produced by the Many Hats Club. I have the wonderful privilege of having Ian Davis on the show. And just before we get into Ian's introduction, I just want to say thank you so much, Philip, for your donation of 25 quid, moving us up to 4,305 quid raised for the Hackers Mental Health and, of course, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning, Ian.
Hey, thank you for joining us. I know we've got Ian and Ian going on right now. So for the benefit of the folks on BeerCom One listening to us on Twitch, um, give us a little bit of your background and what you've been up to in 2019.
So, yeah, I refer to myself as the oldest new guy in InfoSec.
Okay.
Um, I'm in my I'm in my mid-50s, and I have worked in IT since 1980 something. I worked on my first computer when I was in the Royal Air Force. The thing was the size of my house, and the changes that we've seen over my lifetime have been phenomenal. So I started my IT career pretty much straight from school. I joined the RAF and ended up in 1987. Ended up on a site that ran. I always describe it as the predecessor to email. It was a
Right.
it was a telegraphic thing, but it was all done from green screen VDUs with this big mainframe and in a separate dust-free
Was that
environment.
was that the beginnings of ARPANET, where the Americans had sort of built it, and then eventually the UK it expanded to the UK, or was this just a internal UK communication system?
This was an internal UK
Okay.
communication. It was called the Defence Communications Network.
Okay.
Um, and the two products that I worked on, they were called Telegraph Automatic Routing Equipment and Telegraph Automatic Switching System. And originally they weren't electronic. We started to bring teleprinters and punched paper tape, and then we moved to green screen VDUs, and we still printed everything out on paper. So although it came out to the operators on green screen VDUs, they would still print it out, and the actual messages would be delivered to people in classified folders, but they would still be printed out on bits of paper on a teleprinter in the corner somewhere. And that was my introduction into IT, and I've from there done various jobs within that field. I've worked in a SME. I've worked in a very small business. I've worked in education. I've worked in the public sector. I've worked in the private sector, and currently I work for a builders merchant group
Okay.
across Europe. And
So you evolved from IT at, basically military classified communication systems, and then into the wider sort of IT. What was the move towards security a natural one or self-inflicted?
it was so I hadn't realized this until very recently, but even as young as a teenager, I used to I used to do a lot of hardware hacking. I used to take things apart to see how they worked, or to see what I could do with them, or to steal the parts to go and make something else. And I used to go down. We used to have a place just down the road that made TV aerials, and in the days that you had an aerial on your roof for your TV instead of a dish. And I would
Right.
go down there and beg, borrow, and steal aluminium offcuts so I could make my own aerials for the radios that I'd built, or for my CB radio, which was completely illegal and hidden under my bed so that nobody knew I'd got it. But so I think it was inevitable. Eventually, I went and did CEH about 18 months ago now, when I went and did CEH, and that opened my eyes really to a whole bunch of stuff that I just didn't know. I just
Right.
didn't know about. And having spent 30 years in IT, 30 years delivering infrastructure, there was a
Hmm.
whole bunch of stuff that nobody had ever explained to me or shown me, or I knew nothing about Carly. I knew nothing about Metasploit or all of this stuff that we talk about on a daily basis, from penetration testing and kind of actively exploiting vulnerabilities. Nobody had ever. I was completely oblivious to it all, and so were the people around me. Um, I'm quite hard on myself, I think now, thinking that, especially when I look at some of the mistakes I made in the past. But 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 all of the people that I were around me, all of the MSPs that I worked with, the more senior people that I worked with in my younger days, none of us were really had any knowledge of some of the stuff that goes on,
Yeah.
and some of the possibilities.
So was it like falling down the Alice in Wonderland moment, or was it just like a passion that got stirred up in you that you wanted to know more, you wanted to seek the knowledge?
Yeah, it was definitely the latter. I mean, I came back from, so I did my I did the course with a company in Dublin, um, and I came back from that 8 days. Um, I came back from that 8 days just absolutely begging for more knowledge and more information, and to learn more and to do more. And in my mid 50s, for the first time in ages, I was actually really, really interested in building labs again, and doing the technical stuff that I'd loved to do when I was much younger. And that enthusiasm spilled over, or must have spilled over. I was invited by the company that I currently work for didn't have a security team. They had one information security manager, mostly doing governance and policy, and they wanted to build a more proactive, more technical security team.
Right.
We they appointed a new security manager, and my enthusiasm for it must have spilled over, because he came to me and said, I would really like you to come and join me, and if you come and join me and do this is my vision for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Brilliant.
We can do this together. And so I gave up what I was doing, and went and worked with him, and I've been doing that now for about 12 months, which is why I always say I'm the oldest new guy in InfoSec. Because really, I've only
Yeah.
been doing it for 12 months.
But you bring all of this infrastructure experiences, not to mention a lot of contacts, like you mentioned. How important was your network of people, or the people that you know, in sort of like helping you along this journey? Or was it really you felt you didn't have a lot of people that you could go to?
Um, I found it quite difficult when I first came back from Dublin, having done that CEH qualification. I was really, really excited. I'd found a new passion for tech, a whole new set of stuff that at 55 I thought, was I didn't expect to be that excited about IT
Hmm.
ever again, and I found that I found big portions of the community at that time, and I'll qualify that because it's not reflective of where we are today. But when I first started trying to reach out to people to get started, to find more information, I, I was I found quite a negative approach to it,
Yeah.
mostly because of the qualification that I said, look, I've just done this. I want to learn more. Will you help? Where can I get more information? What can I do? How can I learn more about this? And I did run across quite a lot of gatekeeping, and snobbery is the only way that I could describe it. It was like,
Yeah.
but you know nothing. You've only done that. You need to go and do OSCP. You need to go and do more on your own. Nobody will teach you about security. You have to go and learn it on your own. You have to try harder. And that was, I was quite surprised at that. I have to say that on Twitter, particularly now, I find that I've linked up with a whole bunch of people. A lot of them are involved in this today. In fact, I think they're all involved in this today. But
Yeah.
It's not that was a bad experience, but it's not the true experience, I don't think, of InfoSec. And sometimes you find it's the ones with a big following or the loud voice that sometimes are they're doing the gatekeeping. But if you can get past that and find those, we spoke to Dan earlier, didn't we? We were talking about Dan earlier. He's been a fantastic help and continues to be to all of us in this community, as to you and Mike and
thank you,
and Sean and Andy, particularly his outside of Beer Farmers and B-Sides and other things. There's some other projects that I've worked on, and he's offered help, and that's fairly unique, I think, in InfoSec. You don't see that much in IT. I mean, we would all talk about tech, but we wouldn't necessarily go and help each other or put ourselves out to lab stuff out and say, well, I did it this way and it worked for me, or share results. Right. I didn't find that anyway.
So in a way, it did kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's really good, because it's vital that and great that you persevered. I worry that folks wouldn't be as driven, and that we end up losing folks on that journey without the necessary support. Are you active in the community now, and going to conferences and putting in for call for papers and stuff?
So I did 2 rookie talks this year. I've been to 4 community conferences. So I did B-Sides in London, Liverpool, and Manchester. I went to SteelCon as a guest of one of the vendors, one of the promoters, and I plan to do the same next year. I'm hoping to volunteer at 1 or 2 of them next year to get a different perspective of how they run and what they do. And I enjoy public speaking. I hadn't realized how much I enjoyed it, and there's a little anecdote that I'll share about doing that in a if I get the chance before we finish, because I think it's important. But
go for it.
I did so it wasn't public speaking, but I got the opportunity to spend an hour with a bunch of people at work who didn't really want to be there.
Okay.
So I did a talk at head office in Dublin. It was for some very senior people. They weren't quite C-suite, but they were very close. They commented that this had been really informative and really good, and they'd really enjoyed it. And actually, the hour that I'd given ran into 2 hours because they kept asking questions and kept asking questions and kept asking questions.
That's a good sign.
It was a very good sign, and it was very, very positive. And I came back to the UK, and I was asked by the UK people. So our C-suite really now are based in the UK, and I was asked by the UK team to repeat that session in the UK, and we did that. And they just sent out a meeting request saying cybersecurity training, it's mandatory, you must attend. And all of these people came from HR and from finance, and there were no IT people there. We were aiming it at people who weren't within the IT arena at that point.
Right.
And we delivered this training, and I had to leave pretty much as soon as I delivered it. We delivered this session. We just talked about password security. We talked about not oversharing on Facebook, all of the kind of common things we talk about frequently within OPSEC, operational security. It's not really a term I like much, but I didn't get any feedback from that session at all. A few people said that they went back and they were kind of checking, have I been pwned, to see if their email addresses were listed. They were talking about the training. They were telling people who didn't come what they'd missed, which was quite good. And then I was out at the works Christmas dinner on Friday, and this lady came up to me and she sat down next to me after we'd all eaten and said, I just wanted to tell you that the meeting you did on cybersecurity was the best meeting I've ever been to ever in all my time at
Oh,
Grafton.
that's wonderful.
I went home and I was up to I was sweating and shaking in the meeting because I realised that everything I'd done was wrong. And I went home and I was up till 1 o'clock with my husband, changing all our passwords and getting a password manager and going on Facebook and locking Facebook down. And that's one win. Um,
Right.
but it
It's
but
a huge one.
it's a big win because she's now telling everybody else about that. She was
That's right.
telling the HR director and the IT director, and all of her friends are now getting that information from her and not from me. And I don't think I'd realised quite how. I don't think I was ready for infosec being so people oriented. I thought it was tech oriented,
Yeah.
and it's not really. We need to work with people. We're very good at working with tech, but we need to get better and work with people, and we need to aim it at the people who can make a difference, and they're the ones who aren't technical.
Very, very astute observation. And if you want a classic example of how to change security culture in an organization, you, my friend, figured that out by making an ally that will then, go forward and sing your praises. I take a solace in that because victories, as you probably are aware, are sometimes elusive in in this
It,
profession.
yeah, no, I mean, I I was slightly embarrassed by the praise, and because she just, she was full of it. But it was a little embarrassing, but wins don't come very often, and we work in IT ultimately, and you only know you're doing a good job in IT when nobody complains.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. And, I've written on that subject where you get into a situation where you get a very negative outlook because, it's constant war
Yeah.
and it's constantly going against the bad guys. Anyways, we're almost done with you, my friend. Really insightful and very interesting. Any words of advice to somebody at your sort of your age that wants to make the transition into cybersecurity? What advice would you give them?
you, you've got to be persistent. I mean, somebody posted on LinkedIn the other day, you've got to have attitude and aptitude.
Hmm.
You've got to be persistent. You've got to want it, and you've got to be prepared to work. You know, work hard because you've got to do your job and go and learn this.
Yeah,
And I'm finding the learning harder and harder as I get older and older. To be fair,
I hear you.
but there are people out there that just very very quickly. I not so much at my age, but the younger people in infosec, I would say stop measuring yourself against other people and stop worrying about where you are in your career. There was a lady that I follow on Twitter who was really put out. She was measuring herself. She wasn't sure she was in the right place. When I started in IT, I've got it written down here because I had to go and research it. But when I started in IT, Python didn't exist, PowerShell didn't exist, C++ was less than a year old, C# hadn't been invented. Um,
Yeah,
None of us I couldn't possibly know that I was going to end up in information security when I left school and started work. And it doesn't matter where you are now. It matters that you do a good job of what you're doing, and just work hard and don't keep measuring yourself against other people. Do you be you and do a good job.
great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ian. We are going to say goodbye to Ian and welcome Dr. Daniel Dreschner in about 5 minutes. So thank you so much, Ian, and have a great start to your InfoSec morning.
Thank you very much. You take care.
All right.
Bye bye.